Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to an emergency podcast with me, TJ Zuppe, and the guy you hear on the phone, Zack Meisel, and he's running around a lobby right now trying to find out what the next Guardians move is because Zach, it's like throwing a piece of steak to a hungry dog here. I don't know that I was expecting much at the winter meetings, but now that you've offered Josh Bell, now I'm salivating. I want to know what the next thing is. We're never satisfied, and that's the truth here.
Is it an emergency podcast if it's taking place hours and hours after the fact?
Well, it's not my fault that you have another job that pays you a little bit more.
It's rare when this team does something of note at the marquee offseason event, right? I think we expected them to be aggressive. We talked last week a lot about Josh Bell. We have spent months talking about Sean Murphy, and I think it's just like it doesn't happen often in Cleveland when the move that maybe you were expecting the team to make or that fans were hoping the team would make is the move that they make. When do we ever see that?
It feels like never. I mean, maybe you can make that case with Edwin, but yeah. that still didn't feel quite like it was reality, and then it happened. I don't know. Nick Swisher. No, I'm not going to do that. Let's not link any free agents to Nick Swisher. Let's not do that. But hey, you know what? You're right about one thing. If you listen to this show, you are not surprised because I have proof, buddy, that the Guardians listen to this show.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Here's my proof. Let's go back to November 5th. November 5th, the offseason was still brand new. And this happened on the show. I really think Josh Bell would be a nice fit because he's a switch hitter, doesn't have a huge platoon disadvantage, would easily play first base against left-handed pitching if you want to sit Naylor down on many of those days to open it up at DH for somebody else. He could slide between DH and first base with Naylor against right-handers. He's going to be in there in the middle of the lineup. He's still young enough where I'm not shying away from giving him a multi-year deal. I've thought about it just maybe a little bit here, but he is one guy that I think is an interesting proposition. That's a good point. That's a really good point. And you know what? It doesn't end there. Let's flash forward. Just a couple of weeks ago, this happened.
To me, the guy is Josh Bell. I think he's the best fit if we're just talking about first base DH types. Switch hitter, not a stark difference in platoon splits. A guy who has hit for power in the past. Guy who walks a lot, who really improved his strikeout rate. His strikeout rate was about 15% last season. That's fantastic. So I don't know what sort of deal he would command, but probably not going to be as much as Abreu got. And if they're willing to play in that ballpark, no reason why Josh Bell can't be a Guardian.
Huh. What do you know? The good news is we can leave now. We've said all we need to say.
Does anyone have confirmation that Antonetti and Chernoff and Meisel and Zuppe are actually four different people? Look, it's the right fit. I honestly struggled to write an analysis of the signing because it just made sense. Like it seems like it was meant to be. Look, I know people are tired of hearing, and it's not just the Guardians. Like the Red Sox have done this, it seems like 10 times already this offseason where, they finished in second place and bidding for this free agent. I have heard from multiple sources who have not talked about this together that the Guardians made a really aggressive offer for Jose Abreu, probably something that Like a year earlier, if we would have peered into the future and seen that, we would have been like, huh? How does that make any sense? Why would they ever do that? That's so unlike them. He was their top choice, and it was him or Bell. I mean, they knew at midseason when Franmil Reyes, his days were obviously numbered. They knew they needed to upgrade first base DH because even with Josh Naylor, they didn't have internal options that could fill that spot. They have outfielders. If we've talked about, if Oscar Gonzalez falters, you have George Valera, you have Will Brennan, you have Will Benson. On the pitching staff, they have like 12 guys at AA and AAA who could step in the rotation if they needed, but they don't have that corner power guy. Jhonkensy Noel eventually, maybe, but they're not ready for that. So they made a priority to get either Abreu or Bell. They said there was not much out there in the trade market at that position. So I think the surprise I have is that they were able to do it with really only getting Bell for 1 year. If the hope is Bell has a great year and he would elect free agency and the Guardians could toss him a qualifying offer and net a draft pick. But I think that's my only surprise here is I kind of figured he'd get a 3-year deal because he did struggle pretty mightily with the Padres after the mid-season trade. You noted last week, even with that, his on-base percentage was still pretty tolerable because he always walks a lot. He doesn't strike out a ton. So it's just, it fills a glaring need, and you do it with a guy who's not just a 3 true outcomes guy. Draws a lot of walks, doesn't strike out a ton, puts the ball in play. Some years he hits 37 home runs, some year he hits 20 home runs. And you hope it's 37, but it's just,
hey,
it's
what
just
baseball are they
sensible
using?
fit.
The baseball that the Yankees apparently were having? Hey, that's a topic for a different show.
That's true.
Yeah, we've covered it now for weeks that he covers so many of the different areas that would fit this offense. And I think the fact that they don't have to stray from the type of ball that they were playing last year,
Right.
I think that's critical. That he's not some massive, big strikeout guy, but he still maintains the power and the switch hitter. Switch hitters in Cleveland in this lineup, that's already a great marriage. But the fact that he is keeping the Ks tolerable and bringing the power, plays a position in first base that's going to allow you some flexibility, whether you want to DH him, whether you want to play him some at first base. Now you can sit Naylor against tough lefties. We have said that we both don't think they're going to make Josh Naylor a platoon guy at the beginning of the season. Perhaps it evolves into that as the season unfolds. But they're going to give him an opportunity to face left-handed pitching. Later in the year, they can put Bell at first base. They can put Naylor on the bench. They can bring in a right-handed option. And I know they said something about maybe Naylor playing some right field. Maybe you can shed some light on that, but I think that's more about flexibility. But
Right.
It's rare that you have a player that fits into all of those categories, is still good. This is not a case where, you could certainly point to what happened in San Diego and say that's a reason why you get a little bit of a discount here. But Josh Bell is a coveted commodity. This is not somebody's trash like a minor league deal here. This is not Carlos Gonzalez. This is not Melky Cabrera. This is a legitimate, still really good player that is projected to be about 25% above league average in offense. And on top of that, you're covering a position that you got next to nothing from last year. I think that's also an overlooked point, but a very critical one.
Yeah, he's had some inconsistencies in his career. The home run total has fluctuated a lot. The batting average, if you care about that, has fluctuated, and the slugging. So, but the walks, he's walking like 80 times a year, and that provides him with such a high floor. And so if you get some power out of him, you're starting, and we talk all the time about turning Fs into Cs. And I think Josh Bell at his worst is a C. So it's a no-brainer. It's a short-term commitment. It's low risk. And it's low risk for a team that has designs to contend and win. And so they don't care if they're spending. Like $16.5 million for the first season. They've only handed out a single season salary larger than that once in free agency, and that was Edwin. So it's a bigger commitment than maybe they're used to, but it honestly, it doesn't even feel like that much of a risk. Like if he fails, like, yeah, he's probably on your hands again for 2024, but you have so few commitments, and given his track record, like there's no just because if he fails in 2023, that doesn't mean he's going to fail again in 2024 either.
Sure.
And so I think it's just like such a, I was sitting in a company meeting at a presentation. Our buddy Reds writer Trent Rosecrans was waxing poetic about the Tommy Pham slap heard around the world with Jock Peterson and the process behind reporting that story. And I started to get some calls and texts about the Josh Bell thing. I sprinted outside into the hallway, and like, you know, when a team makes a move, like there's a jolt of energy because it's something's happening. And I gotta tell you, like, this was it was just like, oh, okay, yeah, I see it. That makes sense. Like it was just so, I'm not saying that like we predicted this, we knew this was going to happen or anything like that, but it was just like, it seemed like it was just the right match all along. And I think part of it is, I talked to some other people who said like the second half in San Diego probably scared some teams away. And I just don't think there's a huge market for that type of just a free agent first baseman, because it's so easy to stick anybody at DH or at first base. And so he had a limited number of suitors, and I don't know who the Guardians were bidding against. He didn't really have, did you read any, was he linked to any other teams at any point?
Houston,
but they got Abreu. So, yeah.
That's what we talked about when Abreu signed, that, okay, maybe that helps out Bell's market, seeing what Abreu got, but also the main suitor that everyone connected Bell to in Houston was now off the board, and they had their first baseman in Abreu. So, yeah, it just kind of pushed the two sides together in a situation that I'm not only did I not really anticipate that it was going to happen, despite us talking about him being a great fit, I don't think I really thought that it would happen during the winter meetings.
Right.
That seemed more like, remember the Encarnacion thing? As the meetings began, it was kind of a laughable thing, and then by the end of the meetings, everyone was saying, it's a legitimate interest, and it could happen, but it still took some time for Cleveland and Encarnacion to come together. Maybe he wanted to be sure that he wasn't going to get something better somewhere else. The fact that this happened at the winter meetings is probably the most surprising aspect of this.
Yeah. They're not done. I heard today that they feel like they've made progress toward reaching a resolution at catcher. I don't know if that means Sean Murphy or Christian Vasquez or Mike Zunino or Sandy Alomar Jr. or Pat Borders or Einar Diaz or Jesse Levis. But, this shows, you texted me, if I can share that with our listeners, you texted me that this feels like Antonetti in 16, where he's just guns blazing and being the aggressor.
He's feeling it. He's feeling it.
He's on a heater. I said to someone today, it's like, it's so rare when Cleveland is the aggressor, but when they are, like, they could do anything. In 16, we spent that whole night the day before the trade deadline focused on Lucroy, and is he going to accept this deal? Is he going to veto the deal? And we wake up the next morning and they freaking traded for Andrew Miller. So yeah, they'll wield their power when they're in position to do so. They've made trades at the trade deadline, but we don't, Encarnacion aside and Swisher and Bourne aside, we don't often see this in the offseason, but they've had the perfect storm of tearing down. Oh boy, you might be able to hear Mad Dog Russo in the background here in a second. Can't mistake that voice. They've had the perfect
copyright infringement. God, now we're off the air.
they've had the perfect storm of, they tore down the payroll and they tore down the roster, frankly. And so they have a young team and they have so few financial commitments, and yet they're in a position to contend. So that's the sweet spot. You're building up, you're adding, and yet you're already at a pretty good foundation because you have a really young roster that was really good last year and gained some playoff experience. So they're in a good spot. And it's a spot where, like, commend them for signing Josh Bell. It's a great fit. They should be doing stuff like that. Like that should be the expectation, and that shouldn't be the end of their offseason adding.
Oh my gosh.
They still have prospects to trade.
that is surprising to just think about that, but also just what's happening in the background is kind of knocked me backwards a little bit. I don't think it can be overstated that it is, and I tweeted this, for a contending team to have two areas of the roster where you can make significant upgrades, and I stress contending teams. Bad teams can do that in certain spots, where you can take someone where you were getting next to nothing, if not less than nothing at the position, and add someone to it. In Cleveland's position, no other contending team can do that with two spots in the lineup, and they just did it with their DH, and perhaps they do it at catcher. And so it's not just about the fact that Bell could be a solidly above average hitter, and I don't think he's a superstar. He's capable of being an all-star. He has been before. But you compare that to what they had last year. And if you're taking that and you're upgrading that, and then you look at what we've covered it for months now with the catchers, if they're hovering around a 40, 50 WRC plus, and you turn that into a 115, 120, 125 at that position, holy hell. That is such a massive upgrade. So that's why, despite the fact that I don't think Josh Bell is a superstar, he moves the needle for this team specifically, and I see why they moved on this.
Yeah, you can't assume all those young players are just going to keep developing and improving. There's going to be some regression. So take the deficiencies that you know right now are deficiencies, DH and catcher, and you turn Owen Miller into Josh Bell, and you convert Austin Hedges and Luke Mailey into maybe Sean Murphy and Bo Naylor. That you're ahead of the curve. Then if you have some regression from Oscar Gonzalez or from Andres Jimenez or from whomever else, you have internal options who can pick up the slack. So we're not splitting the atom here. I mean, this is not rocket science. We're not unearthing anything that, is revelatory, but I guess it's just if you're a fan of the team, you should feel confident that it seems like the team is on the right path and that they're recognizing the moves that need to be made to ensure that there isn't a setback in 2023 and that you're pushing forward and you're going from being a nice, cute story of a young team that had a bunch of crazy comebacks and won 92 games and pushed the Yankees in the division series to taking that next step and trying to rival the Astros.
So real quick, I know you got to run, and this is just a short reaction show here. We've got some questions, particularly toward the opt-out and why the team agreed to that. In a normal situation, I would believe that the team is not in favor of an opt-out. They want to know what's going to happen with that player, whether they only control him for 1 year or 2 years. They don't really want to put it in the hands of the player in essentially what is a player option. Was it a situation where Bell doesn't agree to this unless that opt-out is in there in that two-year, $33 million contract? Is this a situation where Cleveland kind of looks favorably on it? Where do you think they're at just on that particular subject?
Yeah, this is my speculation here because the deal's not official, so they'll still have to pass a physical. But my guess is that this is something that he was holding out on, and I think the Guardians too. Just it's not a slam dunk that this guy has an excellent season. So I think they were open to it. I couldn't think of another instance, and I asked some people, and they couldn't either, of them ever having a player who had an opt-out. It's not there. They usually like to have control. I mean, I can't even think of instances where a player had just a player option or a mutual option. That's always the club option, right? So this is rare, but I think his agent Scott Boras. Like it was probably necessary to get a deal like this. And
I'm just happy to see they even had his phone number.
Really, I mean, it's a low risk deal. So if you get saddled with a contract that you don't love for 1 year in 2024, you live with it. That's part of it. I mean, if they would have signed him to a 3-year deal, there's a lot of risk there,
sure,
too. So,
and hey, I probably would have been into that on some level, but this one I believe works. You don't block what maybe could be George Valera on the way in a couple of years. You'll have some flexibility, and as we talked about, the fact that there could be a qualifying offer attached to him
right
in the future if he does walk at the end of the contract, and then they could turn around and offer the qualifying offer and perhaps get something out of it that way. It kind of protects them on the back end of things. The last thing, I have seen some confusion about them saying Naylor could try some right field. To me, that speaks more to protection in case, I don't know, Oscar Gonzalez goes down or stinks, and they've at least told Naylor be prepared to play some right field. And then also, hey, I guess I'll hit this. Could that be a way to motivate Naylor to just be in the best shape possible for this year? And I don't think it hurts if his body's ready to play right field some.
Could be. I mean, Terry Francona said he had planned to call Naylor today to talk about it, and it's definitely for the sake of versatility, and you have a guy who can play first base now in Bell. So if Naylor can play right field in a pinch, I mean that can only help you. But then someone else also said that Naylor's the one who wants to play outfield again if that's in the cards. So yeah, it can't hurt, and you're right. It's if you're in the proper shape to be able to bounce back and forth, that benefits the team. So I don't know that I would be panicking and assuming Naylor's going to be the opening day right fielder or anything. But it's just a little speck of flexibility could be in the offing.
All right, I know you got to run. Thanks for jumping on here and
Nelson Cruz is in the lobby right now taking selfies with media members.
So is he the pairing to Naylor against left-handed pitching?
Whoa.
Yeah, you think about that some. And we'll be back later this week over at Patreon to do a more elaborate expansion on this. We're just going to say the same things all over again. But join us at Patreon, patreon.com/LBSGodcast. I'll catch you later, Zach. Bye.